Okay, hello everybody. Welcome back. Today, my guest is Mr. Rich Lewis. He's an author, speaker, and coach who focuses on centering prayer. When I heard that term, I was kind of like, well, what is that? And as we dug deeper, we found out that it turns out to be more of a transcendental meditation that got into the Catholic Church somehow through an anonymous author. I think the book was called The Unknown, or The Universe of the Unknown. We reference it. I can put it in the show notes as well. It was a cool conversation. Really nice guy. We talked about his book, Sitting with God, A Journey to Your True Self Through Centering Prayer. I asked him about his favorite chapters, what he liked the most about his book. And one of the things that we actually came upon was this thing, this small self that he talks about, which and I can refer to in my own meditation practice that the small self is kind of someone that wants to contract in life. I guess when you're afraid of something, or when you're hesitant, or if you have pain, any of these types of things, there's multiple different reasons why you might have let this small self inside you kind of take over. And this style of meditation, this centering prayer, the sitting in silence, is used to calm and take this small self and put him where he belongs. So just enjoy the conversation and see you next time. All right, Rich Lewis, you're joining us today over Zoom.
Great. Thanks for having me on. I look forward to our conversation.
Yeah, like in my Podmatch description there, I have something like religion and philosophy, and this is something that I don't know. I mean, I remember filling out the profile for, trying to attract guests, and it turned into something that I must have had a really good I'm glad I didn't put in, like, I don't know. Sometimes you have moments when you put stuff into your profiles where you're like, today I'm feeling kind of like, martial arts is something I put in there too, but that's something that's part of my life. But and having children and being a father and all these things. But this whole religion and philosophy thing is like a continuous interest of mine. I feel like my contact with religion in different parts of my life, different times of my life, it's different. And I noticed that when thinking about this conversation with you today, because I read on your website a lot about God, and I even noticed my uncomfortability with just saying God. So like I'm an open-minded, I'm a very, and I'm a very considerate person, and I'm really want to just hear, where you sit on that, where you are in this, in your path. I'll be going on your website and looking at the centering prayer that you focus on. Seems like a total interesting thing. I'm into meditation myself, and I think there's a lot of parallels there. And then before we got online, you mentioned that you've been in Germany and stuff. That was kind of cool. So that's just kind of where I stand. I just wanted to put that out there first to kind of get a feeling for, so that where I am, where I stand in that area, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah. So without further ado,
it's funny.
Yeah.
And this has nothing to do with the podcast, but I think I told you, we flew through Frankfurt, and that was the cleanest airport I've ever seen in my life. I still remember it. It was the cleanest airport I've ever seen.
It's true that the airports, the difference between the airports in the States and in Germany are just, it's crazy. Like going to Munich, I've been to a lot of airports in Germany, and then you fly to the States, and it doesn't matter which one. You have like low ceilings and carpet, and you're like, well, I'm in like a Vegas hotel all of a sudden,
Right.
Yeah, that's true. That the airports, they are very, very clean and open, and like really, really very nice glass everywhere, and yeah. At least,
I felt like I was in. If you watched the movie Star Trek, I felt like I was in Star Trek. It had kind of the sliding glass doors to go in and out of different things, to go in and out of the restrooms. It was super clean, and I felt like it was Star Trek.
Yeah, and that was about 20 years ago. You said. So you were doing your master's. Can I ask you what you're doing your master's? What kind of master's were you working on back then?
So actually, I was in Frankfurt a couple of years ago, but yes, I guess I was in Cologne, Germany before the podcast I mentioned, and that was in I got my master's in 2001. So I think I might have been in Germany in 2000 or so. And the master's was an MBA with a concentration in finance.
Cool. I was graduating in high school in 2001, 2002. But no, I mean, you still.
That's okay.
That's all right. I didn't mean to date you.
No,
I look older than you anyway. So from there,
I got some. You can see the gray there. So yeah. I'm 55. So
yeah, cool. Yeah. So that's the thing. Talking about, we're talking about your private life, but. So how does religion, like, where did you get involved? Were you raised in a religious family? I mean, I also didn't really get out of your website. Are you Christian? Are you Catholic? Are you, this is something that you have to really kind of explain to me, because I'm just such a beginner in that sense,
So actually right now I'm in between churches. So prior to this, I was at the United Church of Christ for the last 20 years, which is a non-denominational, I guess you could say, Protestant church. Yeah. How was I raised? I guess my mother passed away when I was 3.5. So, but if she was still alive, I probably would have been Catholic. She was Catholic, and her mother and father, definitely her mother was Catholic. So if my mother was still alive, I probably would have been raised a Catholic. Yeah. And my older sister, went through the Catholic confirmation and I forget what they call it, the two different things. You do the one at a younger age, and then you're confirmed at another age. So I probably would have been Catholic, but my mother passed away. So I actually was not raised really in any type of church. Other than when I was in high school, I ended up going to a Baptist-backed youth group because a bunch of friends invited me. It was Thursday nights. There was Thursday night meetings, and they did a lot of fun things. Yeah. And about 100 teenagers sat in a house that was, I guess, run by a couple of the pastors from that Baptist church, ran this youth group. So I didn't join that church, but I went to the youth group that was backed by the church. But I didn't become a Baptist. I just went to that church. So I didn't really have a background going to church. I ended up joining the United Church of Christ after I graduated from Pitt in 89. I moved back home temporarily while I was working just to get my feet off the ground. And my parents at that time had joined the United Church of Christ, and I ended up going with them. And I found I enjoyed it. So I actually went there for that church for about 20 years and got married in that church with my wife, and she joined. It wasn't until 6 or 7 years ago that we kind of stepped away from that church and were really in between churches. And then in the middle of being away from church, I've discovered centering prayer as well. Okay. And we can obviously talk about that and how I found it. But just to answer your question, I guess you could say Christian. I believe in God. I believe in Jesus. I believe that Jesus is the human incarnation of God. So Christian, I would say. But Christians have you have a wide variety of Christians, you could say, as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like my father, I remember I was in Las Vegas back in the day. He moved to Vegas before me, and he converted to the Mormon church and I remember being out there, and I remember that process being something that was kind of, it's just like he put his arm around me, and looking out on the strip, kind of like where his house was at, and it was a nice view, and it's kind of such a dichotomy, right, to like be in this city of sin. And there's just so many Mormons there, really, too. It's really close to Utah, and there was that, and looking back on it, like there's always like this central thing about it, like the values are always good. There's always just the good stuff that I would like to concentrate on when we talk about religion and stuff like that, and I just know it's so weird. I was talking to Eric about it before. I'm like, why is it so hard for me, to like kind of just let myself into that? I can go into the Buddhist stuff, and I can let myself into all of that stuff so easily, but I'm so guarded when it comes to when it comes to that. So I don't know. I keep on mentioning that because I just don't want it to actually, me mentioning it is probably more distracting than not mentioning it. But somehow I don't know. Like, I have a similar upbringing, like I was raised kind of just, I'm baptized, and I've gone to church with my dad before, and I've been to churches mainly probably because of girlfriends or social groups and stuff like that, where that's like the positive thing again, right? You see this positivity because you're hanging out with your friends and you guys have something in common, and it's actually just about the people. And later on in life, when tough things happen and you're looking for answers, it seems like this is when you're faced with this like, well, how do I get myself out of these tough times? And that's usually when things like religion start to really help. And it doesn't matter which one it is, really. I don't know really where I'm going with that, honestly. it just is something that I guess when I was looking at your site and you talk about this centering prayer, what is that? What is centering prayer? Explain that to me, please.
Sure. So centering prayer is a form of a silent, wordless prayer. It's been around since the early 1970s. It was created by three Trappist monks, so three Catholic priests in the early 1970s. And what they saw was transcendental meditation going on, and they wanted something for the Christian community. Okay. So they created centering prayer in the early 1970s, kind of rolled it out to the clergy and priests, and then really rolled it out to everybody, to just to the public in general. So it's been around since the early 1970s, and it's considered meditation and a relationship with God. So it's a practice that opens us up to the presence of actions and presence of God within us, is what centering prayer is. And then I'll quickly describe it. It has guidelines of how you do the practice, and you sit comfortably with your eyes closed. And then to begin your practice, you introduce interiorly a word, 1, 2, 3 syllables. So you can pick whatever word you like, love, ocean, a color, Jesus, whatever word that begins your prayer. Okay. And then while you're sitting in silence, whether you've chosen 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes, whenever you engage your thoughts, and what I mean by that is whenever you begin thinking about what you're going to do after your sit, or you begin thinking about what happened before you sit, you realize that you're not sitting really, you're pondering and plotting and planning. So you reintroduce that word interiorly to bring yourself back to the present moment and let go of these engaged thoughts. And you just do this when needed. Sometimes you naturally bring yourself back. Other times you need to bring this word back to your mind to let go of your thoughts. And that's really what you do during the entire prayer. The only other thing I'll say is you don't have to use a word. I actually use an image. So I kind of picture an image in my head. You can use your breath to come back to the present, or you can even center with your eyes open and just stare at a spot straight ahead, 4, 5, 6 feet, in the distance on the floor. So, but that's essentially a little bit about centering prayer, how long it's been around, and how you do the practice.
Yeah, it sounds very similar to what it is. It's like this transcendental meditation, really. It's something that, and for me, it's incredibly challenging.
To do the practice itself.
Yeah, it's just incredibly challenging too. Like there's days where there's just no chance. I think that there's days where these thoughts, having something like an anchor, like a word, or I think the breath was really helpful when I first started. Is great, but I just feel like in the moment these thoughts, like they you're trying to let them go and not have any attachment to your thoughts, really. And that's
right.
Something
that's exactly what you do. You're letting go of any engaged thoughts and just coming back to the present moment with your sacred method, and then letting go of that as well.
And it seems like this is something that's really tricky, because when you practice that really, I noticed that really bled over into my life, because I have kids and we all have things, right? Life is just what it is, and there's these moments where you just want to attach to it, and like I'm just triggered or whatever. And I feel like when I'm doing my practice enough and I'm on it and I do it regularly, I tend to have at least a 3.5 second buffer there where I just don't jump on, I don't grab onto that emotion or grab onto that reaction as hard as I do, or at least I'm able to like, whoa, just catch it for a second, and everybody benefits from that, you know. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. Like, is that have you ever experienced that? I mean, I don't know what kind of person you are. We don't really know each other that well, but I'm kind of an impulsive person. I tend to have like this Italian type of temper. And so this type of meditation like really helps me keep that in check, you know.
No, I would agree. Just, the letting go that I do during centering prayer, kind of, I take it with me outside of my practice, and you'll learn to better let go, not be as reactive in everyday life as well. It sounds like that's what you're explaining. So I've kind of learned the same thing, to slow myself down, be a better listener, don't react, don't feel that I need to instantly say something. I just need to listen or watch as often is what I've discovered. And I can let go of things that, if I'm busy at work, I'm better able to let go of things that are maybe not needed to do at that moment and focus on the things that I need to do to get done for the day.
Yeah. So you mentioned a finance degree or a finance master's. Are you working in finance at this time, or?
That's okay. I'm in the 401k business. So I work for a large corporation, and we handle 401k corporate accounts for clients.
Yeah.
So I'm not exactly using my degree, but that's okay. I enjoyed getting the degree and all the different things that it involved. But I'm actually in the 401k space. So if you work for a company and they have a retirement plan,
right,
I handle kind of the day-to-day operations for some of our large corporate accounts that have 401k accounts with us.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you never know. I asked that just because sometimes you see like there's some type of connection there. I mean, obviously, all of these things connect with everything, right? That's the funny thing, you know. It's just having a stressful day or having these tools to kind of just bring you back to center. My next question would be, I guess, where's the time that you cut out for this? Like, how do you cut out the time, or how do you plan this I guess not a pattern, but this ritual into your daily life?
Sure. So I do 2 sits a day, and I try to do two 20-minute sits. So the first thing I do before I begin my day is my practice. So whatever day it is, that's the first thing I do to begin my day. And that's what I recommend when people ask me, well, when should I do it? I tell them, well, make your first sit the first thing you do as you begin your day. And for me, I think I miss it, and my day it doesn't start as well when I don't do it. So make it the first thing you do. And then after you've gotten maybe the first sit down, then I tell people to take baby steps. So if you've never really meditated before, start with a 5-minute sit and work your way up to 10 minutes, to 15 minutes, to 20 minutes. And then I tell them, once they've gotten that down, add a second sit and take a look at your life and think about, well, where does it fit? Where does it make the most sense? So right now, for me, it makes sense before I eat my lunch. So my second sit is before my lunch is when I do it. And then I tell people, if they have to, take baby steps again with that second sit, make it 5 minutes, and then 10 minutes, and then 15 minutes, and then 20 minutes. So that's what I like to tell people is, put your sits where they belong. But I think, for me at least, and probably for many people, I highly encourage at least to begin your day with a sit. I think that's kind of the best way to begin your day. It just gets you ready for the day and connects you to God, connects you to life, and gets you going.
Yeah. The beginning of the day thing is big, for sure. I for a while I was doing that personally. Like I've been off of it for a while, and that I noticed that too. Just because whatever, we went on vacation and then we're doing other things, and then it's like, well, this sit's just not happening, or this this meditation moment, it's not built into my schedule anymore, and I miss it. Like I want to, But for me, it actually means like getting up really early in the morning. So it actually turns into me going to bed really early in the evening. And I it's something that's like this. Have you ever heard of this? What's it called? The 5 a.m. Club. It's a book, and in the book it kind of describes like this ritual that you should do an hour before everyone else gets up in the morning, which usually around 6 a.m. So it's like 5 a.m. club means 20 minutes you move around, you do something physical, 20 minutes you meditate, and the last 20 minutes is like you kind of just you read a book, you bring some type of new information that you want in there. And I found that actually doesn't really work doing that split, because by the time I'm awake and by the time I'm doing everything, it's been 15 minutes, and then by the time I'm done with everything, it's been another 50. So I usually end up having to make it about an hour and a half. So I was getting up at like 4:30 in the morning.
Oh.
Yeah, and in the wintertime in Germany, it's well, Pittsburgh is kind of a northern hemisphere area too, right? Like it gets really dark in the winter. So, going to bed when it's dark, waking up when it's dark, it's just one of these things. And in the wintertime, it actually seemed more natural somehow, because it was like a way to even kind of keep you mentally fit because this depression kind of wants to set in and when it's dark. And that was really interesting. But in the summertime, it's like, no, I don't want to go to bed. It's super light out at night. Like it's the opposite here in the summer. It's light all the time. It barely really gets dark here. And I just have a hard time just like saying, okay, it's nice and warm outside. We can be swimming in the pool with the kids and doing all these things. I'm just going to go to bed now so I can have my hour and a half time for myself. It's kind of a trick, but yeah, to second you on that, like, and also what you said before about listening and having that time to stop. And I think that's what this meditation really benefits. It had personally in my life, it benefited me a lot. And when I was also looking on your website, I found something about this book. This is a new book that I've never heard of before. And I just jumped a copy. I got a copy real quick on Kindle. Not your book yet. We'll get to your book, sir. But I was on this, let me just check it out real quick. Where was I at? Sorry. Kindle. Just took the Unknowing. What was it called? The Cloud of Unknowing.
The Cloud of Unknowing. Okay, is that what you were saying?
Yeah, so have you read this book?
Yeah, I've read I guess a translation of it, and it's some of it is I don't get, and some of it I do get, and centering prayer is based upon that book. That the method of centering prayer was found in the Cloud of Unknowing. So that book has some really good, powerful stuff in it, and then some I read and I don't get anything out of it. Maybe I'm just not ready for all of it, but then some of it that I've read through, I enjoyed and found was pretty powerful. I actually read it for the first time a couple months ago.
Oh, cool. That's interesting. Yeah, because I got a copy, and I don't know if there's probably different copies that have, because it was written in this type of English that was very, it was before Shakespeare, so it was very, I don't know what the type of English that it was, but.
Right.
So do you have, what version of the book did you get? I would like to have a version that's not so, I don't know, so heeth and theeth, thou shall that. It's very Bible-y. It's hard to read, honestly.
Yeah, there's a couple. I don't have my my iPad with me. I could look after the show. I could share it with you. I think of William Johnston. I'm trying to remember the name. His version of the book, and I can get it to you. I looked for a version that made the most sense, that was really in English, in common English for me to read. So I think William Johnson is his version is whose it is, and it was William Meninger. I was listening to a talk he gave, and he's one of the founders of Centering Prayer, and he had recommended a particular version, so I took him up on his suggestion.
All right. Well, let's get into your book. So how did you come about deciding, there's enough here that I'm going to make a book out of this?
Sure. So I had started practicing centering prayer. I discovered centering prayer in late 2013 in a book called Healing the Divide, Recovering Christianity's Mystic Roots by Amos Smith, because I had always been interested in silence, but I just didn't know what to do in the silence.
Right.
And then I was perusing Amazon, looking for a book to read, purchased the Kindle version of his book, and in the book it talked about centering prayer. So that really intrigued me. It was a practice for the silence, and I reached out to him and just began a dialogue went to his website, and we began an email dialogue, and we've actually become friends since then. Um, and then I began working with him. He saw that I was very interested in centering prayer and some of the things that he had to say, and I actually began working with him. And I had a Monday meditation go off his site, and he had his meditation going, I think, on a Thursday and mine on a Monday. And we just had a lot of back and forth dialogue via email and phone call. And Amos is the one that challenged me to write a book. He thought, that I had something interesting to say that would be different from his version. He's not a pastor at the present time, but at that time he was a pastor of the United Church of Christ, and his book was more academic, and he thought I could approach it from an everyday person standpoint and make it maybe more accessible. So he's the one that challenged me to write the book, and I took him up on it. He actually simply said, jot down some sentences. What do you think about centering prayer? And jot down some sentences on, because in his book, the two things that jumped out at me were centering prayer. And then he also talked about what he called the Jesus paradox, Jesus being God and human at once. So I jotted down a bunch of single sentences about both topics. And then he said, now you have your chapters, go write. But I wasn't just going to go write a whole book. I picked one of them, wrote a chapter, and kind of shot it back to him in an email just to see what he thought. And he thought it was fresh and interesting. And then at that point, I was convinced, I think I can do this. So then I spoke to my wife, and I decided to write the book on Saturday mornings, not take time away from the family. So I actually got up, disciplined myself to get up and go to the Starbucks. This is pre-COVID. Go to the local Starbucks, and I wrote from about 6 a.m. to 9 or 10 a.m. on Saturdays, and that's mostly how the book got done. So it was Amos challenging me to write a book because he thought I really had something interesting to say and enjoyed centering prayer. And then he really helped me through the process and helped me edit the book and approach publishers and get through the whole process. So that's how it happened. I wasn't looking to write a book. I was simply exploring, looking for another book to read, and then it led to this. And then eventually, actually 4 years ago, I created my own site, silenceteaches.com, as well. So it's led to some really interesting things. And the book itself, Sitting with God, A Journey to Your True Self Through Centering Prayer, it's hard to believe will be out next month. It'll be out a year.
Right on. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's a discipline. Everything that I have ever found on writing books, it's the number one thing is always this, exactly what you did was this, like this. You have to just sit down and write. That's what's that feeling like when you sit down there? I mean, you were interested in this, so that's great. I feel like cool. The first chapter, it was flowing. That's obviously having a mentor is great, right? Because he can kind of give you that feedback. We'd be like, well, maybe you should not touch it. You're like, okay, that's what I would expect. I'd write somebody out and be like, well, this is what I want to do, and be like, well, Remington, yeah, maybe not. And they'd be like, okay, no big deal, no harm, no foul, and that's what it was. But he came back and said, yeah, this is good. Keep it going. And so you made the time. That's another thing, like making this time and sitting down and writing and sitting on a blank screen, and coffee is a good thing too, right? I mean, I was listening to a podcast the other day, Michael Pollan talking about he got off coffee when he was writing this book, his latest book, and he's like, the whole chapter is basically in jeopardy because he couldn't drink coffee while he was writing this chapter, and it's just like, I guess Starbucks is a good place to be for that.
No, I mean, it's definitely, is a discipline. I found I really enjoyed it. Initially I didn't know what to expect, but then I began enjoying it, and it really became a really wonderful spiritual practice for me, because right. Most of there's 14 chapters in the book. Most of the chapters are more, I just kind of relaxed and let it flow. One of the chapters was on Jesus, and that required some research of what do the scholars tell us about Jesus that we know and think is true. So that I did some research, read some books, and listened to some podcasts, and to listen to some of the different people speak. But for the most part, and then I wrote. But it was just a neat spiritual practice. You just need to let go and let the words flow out of you to your fingertips and just write and not really worry about what you're saying, because you're just dumping the words down. And then when you have your chapters, then you're going back and then editing, and that's where you're fine tuning and editing and moving paragraphs around and adding headlines so that it's not like one giant chapter they're reading. They're, what's under that headline that you're reading. And then you think about stuff such as, the beginning of the chapter, you want to pique interest. So you want to have, a good start off sentence or two before you jump right into your topic. And then at the end of each chapter, you want to have questions for discussion and reflection, because you can have your book get turned into a book study. But the first thing to do is just to write and dump the words down and not worry. And then when that's done, then you're fine tuning, moving things around, adding headings, adding the questions. And then you're even doing things such as, moving chapters around. Do I really have the right order that this should be read in? And is there a section in one chapter that is best suited for another, chapter? And then making sure you have your end notes as well. So, but the first thing to do is just to dump it all down. And then, I think of it as you're wearing many different hats. You're a writer and just dumping the words down. Then you become an editor and you're editing your book. Then you become a marketing person because you want to let people know it's coming. And then the book has, as far as I'm concerned, has a lifetime of forever. So you want to constantly tell people about your book as well. And you're a business person because you're going to either self-publish it or you're going to approach publishers and try to take the traditional route. So authors wear many hats, and you got to shift kind of the way you think, whether am I a writer now? Am I in editor mode? Am I in marketing mode? Or am I in business mode? So the whole thing was a neat experience for me.
It sounds interesting. It's that whole process. For me, the most, I don't know, like just sitting down and really having that moment, that time to contemplate it and then to put it out and just increase. I guess what I feel like when I just do even a small little thing for myself. I've probably gotten like 5 started books on my computer here, just like this one, like that first chapter thing, like, oh, this is an idea, and I just get all and that first blurb hits, but then there's like all of a sudden there's something that I'm done with it, or my mind stops, or maybe, like I said, maybe the caffeine just stops, but it feels like picking that up again and doing it again and keep on going and going back to it to the point where you enjoy it. I can see that. I can see that being something. I wanted to ask you, as you were explaining that, first off, what chapter is the Jesus chapter?
I believe it's 9 or 10. I moved to a different room, but I believe it's 9 or 10.
Okay, cool. And is that your favorite chapter, or which would you say is your favorite chapter out of that book?
I think the one on my true self, I think, because I think that's really what a practice, meditation practice, centering prayer for me connects me to my true self, the person that I think God wants me to be, and connects me to the actions I should be taking as I get up from my silent sits, every day. So I would say probably that's the chapter where I'm just talking about my true self and connecting to my true self. Because that's what I think, these types of practices can do. You let go of all the thoughts and emotions that aren't who you are and connect to who you are and the person, you want to be each day and the actions you want to take every day.
Okay. Yeah. When I get to this part of my practice, just like this true self thing, and I guess it's something that it's more of a Buddhist thing, right? Where they call it dualism, right? This idea of self in itself, like this idea of self. Do you feel like there is sometimes, I feel personally, I don't know how you might feel, but that self gets in the way a lot of the times, like this idea of self. Like, what do you think about that? How do you find that you have a real positive connection to self? It sounds like you use this time to reconnect with the internal self and create your goals and your next steps in your life out of these sessions. But I'm always conflicted with that exact same idea. I have a meditating guy talking in my ear saying, self is an illusion, right? So where do I go from there? Those are two conflicting ideas in my mind somehow.
Well, I think I guess maybe it's our small self is telling us things that really are just not true about ourselves, and our true self is who I'm trying to connect with. So my small self might be telling me things such as, I'm afraid to try this, so I'm not going to do it, or I'm too young and someone older with more wisdom and experience should try it, or I'm too old at this stage of my life and someone who's younger should be doing it. So that's the self I'm trying to let go of and connect to the true self that says, no, you're the right person to do this and get going is how I think of it. So during centering prayer, I'm just letting go of all thoughts, no matter what thoughts I'm telling myself, and just opening to the presence and actions of God within. And I think of it as a reverse prayer. God is praying in me the actions that I need to take, or God's just praying in me things such as wisdom or confidence or inner peace of what I might need just as I get up from my sit. But that's really kind of how I think of it. Is I'm getting my small self out of the way, my small, fearful, maybe angry or annoying or not so nice Rich out of the way, and connecting to the true self Rich.
Yeah, like the small self is this with letting go of fear and even pain or things like that we tend to hold on to because it seems like maybe it was something that's built into us genetically, but from the cave times, being caveman, and like it was some way of us protecting us or keeping us safe away from the saber-toothed tiger. So we needed to be, cautious when we go outside of the cave, and it's like, well, we don't really have that. I wonder how many things I've worried about that just never came true, right? That's interesting. Yeah. There's moments though too, like I was listening to one guy. I was saying that to Eric before we got online here today. He said that he was practicing. He was in a retreat, and he went into the cafeteria to get a tea because he had a headache. Because they do these long sits. Sometimes some of these retreats, I don't know. I've heard of these stories where these people are just doing silent retreats for a month or something like that, right? They're just and I guess the guy that was leading it was also there, and he came over to the man that was telling the story and asked him how is he doing, and he said, well, I have a headache, it's kind of like bothering me right now, and he's like, well, I hope you're enjoying that. It's like, what? And it was like this idea of contraction, right? This idea of like being like I have pain or I have fear, so I kind of feel like there's this contraction that happens in you in that moment. And I guess that was what the guy was trying, or his teacher was trying to teach him in that moment, was that, well, maybe you should just not contract so much and actually just go into the pain more and go into the headache or go into that fear, see where it takes you. And it tends to usually alleviate the problem somehow. It takes a little bit of courage though, right? And takes a bit of practice to not be even afraid of that step, or to not be afraid of where it's going to take you in that moment. That's just something that this small self it's trying to protect you somehow. I don't know.
No, exactly what you're saying. Thomas Keating, one of the founders of Centering Prayer, actually mentions similar to what you were just saying in his book. Sometimes we're sitting in silence and we just have so much pain, or there's just a very something like that is going on, and he said that then can become your sacred method, and you sort of lean into it and not push it away and just be with it. So it's very similar to what you were just saying. Sometimes you have to do that. Like, you can't let it go. It's just too strong and overbearing. So when that happens, he's encouraging us to kind of use that as our method and just go into it. And don't fight it, and just be with it.
Yeah. It takes a bit of courage though. And I think it's actually
right.
just, and I think it's just also even just a habit, like years of habit of just being like, well, this is painful, so I'm going to avoid that. It's just like a natural reaction, and to actually be aware. And when you're contracting, sometimes when I listen to people, you're like a really intent listener. So it's just that I don't have an example in the last hour, but you ever notice it when you're talking to somebody and something bothers them and they do, and they breathe, they do this like real sharp, like they breathe in, and I notice, I'm like, oh, this person, that's a contraction. It's like they're totally sucked into that, and now their reaction that's coming is totally fear based. Like I think that I heard it something like it's the same reaction that happens neurologically when a antelope runs away from a leopard. It's because they need all this oxygen to get to make their escape. So they do this deep breathe in, and it's an instinct to run away. And we humans, we do that same thing. So it's just and noticing it in yourself, like if I just, oh gosh, and I have this thing, and everything that comes after that is probably not really who I am. It's not really the Remington that's relaxed and logical and, emotionally open and ready to connect to somebody. That's not me in that moment when I'm in this mental state. It's weird.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah. So, yeah. Interesting. I don't really know where to go from there, buddy. I just I feel like you really impressed me with writing the book, and I feel like that's something that when you said that, I'm going to go back to this recording again and want to even check in on that and just use it as a tool for myself to try and figure out. I just don't know what I'm going to write about. That's the main thing.
I guess just jot down some things that are important to you. Maybe just start jotting down some single sentences that are important to you, and those can become ideas for chapters. That's what happened with my book. I just jotted down, as he just told me to jot down ideas in single sentences, and those ideas became chapters, and then you can just start writing and or even brainstorm things underneath that idea and what would fit into a chapter, for example.
Did you ever have those?
But you just have to start and just do it, and then just go with the flow. It's going to change and shift. Sure. Anyhow.
Did you ever have those moments? I've heard that from comedians too, where they have like a notebook with them and they write stuff where you're like, oh, I got to write this down. Did you have like a method for writing down ideas that popped up at you? Did you have to like leave the room and write it down real quick, or are you able to keep track of it for the next writing session? Or
I put them in my phone because usually my phone's always in my pocket anyhow, and there's like a notepad app on my phone. So I actually, whenever, and that did happen, I could be anywhere and suddenly something would come into my mind and I would think, oh my gosh, I got to put that in a book. Or I would read and a quote, and I'd be like, I got to talk about that because that quote is really neat. So I just jotted things down in my phone and kept it there. That way, when I then was writing on Saturdays, I could go look there and start pulling from my notes as well. So yes, things jumped into my head many times, and obviously not while I was writing. So I put them in my phone and in the notepad app of my phone, just so I didn't lose it.
Yeah. Did you ever lose something?
I
guess you wouldn't really know.
I don't think I did. I was fortunate that I didn't lose anything. Maybe the biggest mistake I made with writing the book, if you're quoting people, obviously you have to do an end note. So I spent hours after I had finished the book trying to find what book was that in and what page number was that in. So the biggest lesson for me now is, as I'm writing, is if I'm quoting someone or citing someone, as soon as I type it in the document, I'm immediately doing the end note and immediately citing it, because I spent hours trying to find where I found some of the things I wrote. So that was my biggest error or thing I didn't know what I was doing, but now I do, is cite my work immediately as I'm writing it and put an end note right in the document.
That's a good tip. Yeah, for sure. Like, oh, this is great. I use it and I have it's a perfect flow. And then at the end, you're like, where did I get that from? I have to go back and figure out exactly where this quote is. And just typing the quote into Google is not going to bring you right to the spot most of the time. It's probably like
you can go into Google book. There's like Google Books, and a lot of times find stuff. But then there was some stuff I just couldn't find, and there was probably 2 or 3 or 4 that we just between myself and the editor couldn't find, so we just removed it or found something else that was similar and worked. But so we found most of it, but there was probably 3 or 4 that just could not find. So she said, well, we'll have to paraphrase it so it's no longer considered like an endnote. And I said, that's fine, because I just cannot find where there was 1 or 2 authors, and I could not find where I had found that sentence that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, it's interesting. Oh gosh, this turned into a little tips for book writing. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Yeah. It's been great talking with you, Rich Lewis. I'll put all the links to your socials and to your book in the show notes. But please, again, mention your book and just give us a little plug for where we can find you.
Sure. Well, the best place to find me is silenceteaches.com. They come to my site and subscribe. You'll get I have a free and short ebook on centering prayer. And then if you want to learn more about centering prayer and read about, what it is and how it has healed and transformed me, you can get more information on my website regarding my book, Sitting with God, A Journey to Your True Self Through Centering Prayer. And then I do guest speaking. So I've been asked to come to various groups, whether it's church groups or book study groups or spiritual director groups, have invited me to speak. And then some people that, want to do a practice and just don't know how to start, I offer one-on-one coaching, and I offer kind of 3 different groups of people that I over the years it's evolved into is people that just need help with how to start. And then kind of a second group of people is people that are already practicing, but want to go deeper in their practice and go deeper in, who is their true self? How do I connect to this person? How do I live from this person? And then a third group of people that naturally evolved are people in ministry have come to me to say, I'm burning out and I'm doing a terrible job of self-care. So they come to me and say, help me with my self-care. So that's a little bit about me, my website, my free ebook on it, my book, and then some of the things that I'm currently doing and working on. And I just challenge people just to try centering prayer or some type of meditation practice. Just try it. Try it for a month, maybe make it the first thing you do as you begin your day, and see what happens and see how it might change you.
It's interesting. It's interesting that you also bring up that about pastors that are burning out. And I heard something about that from a different. I listened to a lot of what Sam Harris says, and he said something about that. And he was talking to in one of his podcasts or something like that. He had mentioned that he gets messages, from these pastors that are basically they're trapped in this life because the whole community is built around them, and they are this prominent figure in this social construct there. And they feel like they're losing faith, but I wonder if it's not just that. It's that more just what you're saying. They feel like they're burned out. They're mentally just not able to really reconnect with God. And when they started out, I can imagine, it was all good and it was flowing, but I can imagine that this type of meditation would really help people like that.
No, it really would. Yeah, I think they're just they're servicing so much on others that they're forgetting that they need to take care of themselves, and they're not, or they're not setting proper boundaries, and they're available 24/7 when sometimes you have to have boundaries, and they need to have their own life, and they need to have boundaries, and they definitely need to take time for self-care. If they don't reset and recharge, they're not going to be good for anybody, including themselves.
Yeah, for sure. That whole energy feeling, and your health, people, they love to take your energy, right? You got someone that's that has some type of connection, and the people like that, when you meet them, you feel it. You feel this energy, and you might not even notice that you just take it all for yourself, and if they're not conscious of the fact that people are, obviously it's like, well, this is my job, this is what I have to do. But at the other end, it's like, well, you can't do this job unless you actually, take care of yourself first.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Interesting. Cool. Well, then, thank you very much for your time. Stick around once we get offline. I just wanted to have a couple questions for you still, and then.
Sure.
All right.
No, thanks for having me on, and hopefully your community will have found our discussion helpful for them with the various topics we discussed.
Yeah.
So thanks for having me on.
All right. Bye-bye.